This is the final word story time, 223. Adam Collins with you. It looks like I'm in a storeroom. I'm actually in the Sky broadcast box at the Oval, but it's something of a storeroom at the moment. There's a county game playing out in front of me. 223 is the score that George Headley made in April 1930 at Jamaica, a test match that we often talk about in the context of other people, but it was the man known as the Black Bradman who made 223 there, and a year later, the guy who was actually called Bradman made 223 as well. Hello, Geoff. He's in Portugal. I'm in England.
Perfect. It all comes together. Sometimes it all works like that. 10 hundreds in 22 tests is what I'm going to say off the top of my head. You can tell me if that's right or wrong for George Headley, who maybe played a couple too many, but, he's right up there in those who played the game. I've got a very interesting story I'm keen to tell you today, another one that you'll know a bit more about that might relate to where you are, but that's all going to come in a moment. Remember, if you want to play Nerd Pledge or if you want to get the feed without the automated ad breaks, go to patreon.com/thefinalword. The show's brought to you by Morris Blackburn, #1 plaintiff law firm in Australia. And we've had some exciting news as well that Fergie, Bill Ferguson, the scorer, the wagon wheel inventor, the baggage carrier for cricket teams for about 50 years, his grave has been restored. We talked about this campaign on the show. Some people chipped in some money to make it happen. And we've seen photos of the restoration, a very fine looking, I assume it's marble, but there's been some stone masonry done on what was a very overgrown and falling apart grave where you could barely read the inscription. And now it's looking schmick and new, and a part of cricket history has the respect that it should have.
Yep, I'm going to be recording an episode down there in July. So now that it's all been restored, there's going to be an opening, which I don't know whether I want to make the opening, but there are plans afoot. So pleased to see that news come through. I've been corresponding with those guys during the week, which is a nice thing and perfectly in line with story time, which is what we play on the weekend edition of the show. This is all about telling the tales of the game that sometimes go years or decades without being told adequately.
Mm-hmm.
I've just spent half an hour on commentary talking with Mark Ramprakash about, among other things, the 1998 Melbourne Test match. I'm like, this feels like a Storytime episode, except that the subject is next to me as he talks me through the catch that got rid of Justin Langer at square leg that very much turned the tide that day. But then when you and I get to do it, it's talking about people, like Ramps occasionally. He's featured before, but many other do, the great and the good, and sometimes the less great and the less good. We do it through the mechanism of Nerd Pledge, which is where you send in a number. It can be a cricket-related number. It doesn't need to be, but often it is. And then we'll tell you a story. You'll know it's not boring, to quote from the Strokes. Right, and the first number today is for me, Kennedy H. Ross. It's not his first radio. 221 AUD. We thank Kennedy for his long-term support of the show. Has a clue for me.
Yes, 221, which is almost the episode number. Kennedy says, this refers to the first game I ever saw while travelling through Southeast Asia roughly a decade ago with my Australian girlfriend, now wife. I'm glad that worked out. She wanted me to know enough about cricket to be able to keep up with the chat when we went to visit her family for Christmas that year. Can't say this match made me fall in love with the great game, in inverted commas, which makes me think there's got to be a Michael Clarke link somewhere, the great game of cricket. But seeing Warner smash centuries sure did. Centuries, plural. Great game. Michael Clarke, 10 years ago. Where's Kennedy from, if you didn't know about cricket? Is Kennedy American? Is Kennedy Canadian?
As in, he's pledging in Australian dollars. I've got a feeling he's Australian.
But so must have moved to Australia. Had to impress the family. Had to impress the family at Christmas. Didn't know about cricket, so can't be English.
I'm going, given the middle initial being cited, American.
Yeah.
There aren't many countries where the middle initials relied upon as heavily as it is in the States.
That's true. And the first name being also a last name is a very United States thing.
And a presidential name, not least.
Presidential.
So,
I always think about the Dead Poets Society, the character named Knox Overstreet. That, for me, that is the quintessential American name, that kind of old money Massachusetts name,
That'd be one of those ones you see on a quiz sheet where it's got like man overboard and the two names written under each other, like Knox Overstreet. You see like you can see how that would work for you quiz masters out there. Well, Kennedy H. Ross, I have an answer for you, and it does align with what Geoff's suggesting there. A test match that Michael Clarke captained a test match where David Warner made 100. An important test match in the context of final word history as well. For this, we're going to go to the keep your eyes open for a bargain, Dubai Sports City. Originally suggested it might be Abu Dhabi, but no, Dubai is where we're going to. A test where Australia played Pakistan in 2014. Now, the second test in this series, I've got very fond memories of. I can detail almost all of it. The test at Abu Dhabi where, Mitch Marsh made his 87 when we were doing our White Line Wireless commentary, and I insisted that Australian batters didn't get out for 87 and was dismissed next ball, where Australia played 3 quicks and 5 all-rounders, which was an unusual combination, where Yunus Khan made a double 100, having made twin hundreds the week before, where Misbah al-Haq made the equal fastest 100 in test match history, which again is a lovely...
Twins? There are twin twins in that, aren't there? Misbah and Azhar Ali both make twin hundreds, I'm
Good
going to
question.
say.
I can't remember the Azhar Ali bit, but I'm certainly... Yunus definitely did, and we'll come to this.
Yunus does the week before.
Okay, so Yunus makes the double 100 in the first test match, and then in the second test match... I'm confusing myself. His double 100 was in the first innings of the Abu Dhabi test.
Yes.
Having made, and we'll come to this in a moment, twin tons in the first test. But the Abu Dhabi thing is special on a whole range of fronts, sitting there with, Tom Cowie and I were calling it from the Age newspaper, but about 30 of us jammed into Geoff's living room. I'd raced straight to Brunswick from East Malvern, where we were defeated that day by a team that included a young Will Sutherland, who was playing for East Melbourne Taronga that year in his Sunday comp as like a 15-year-old boy, and a couple of other players that have gone on to enjoy really successful careers. But that was the test where, Maxi batted 3, which again is a piece of commentary that's featured on Calling the Shots, where I get stuck into them for that, and Zulfikar Barber and Yasir Shah and all the rest of it. So test number 2, all good. Could write a book on it. Might one day. Test number 1, a little bit less so, although there is still plenty of important links in the chain. So it's a little bit self-referential, but, this is where it all started for you and I in many respects as far as commentary is concerned. So less love for that test match. But, this is the one where you invited me to come around on night 1, and I did straight from cricket training and kind of didn't leave, where Pakistan were at that stage batting on day 1 and batting. Although it's worth noting that I remember going in, I was seeing it. The reason I was late and couldn't be there for the start of the test match, my favourite film, or close to my favourite film, is Once, which is the beautiful Irish film. It's based in Dublin, about a busker who meets another musician, and they record an album together, and it's glorious. And it's like, again, one of my all-time favourite films. Whenever I see it on a flight, I always pick it, sing all the songs, have a cry, and I'm seeing the two of them, Glenn Hansard, who's the lead, perform next month, actually, in London. Anyway, I digress. I was at that musical. They turned it into a musical, and that was playing that night in the city. So I went to that first and then came straight from there. And on the way into the theatre, I remember seeing that Australia had gone bang, bang to start the test match. Mitchell Starc, make that the other Mitchell Johnson had gone, he'd blown...
Knocked over the Professor.
Hafiz. Hafiz's front pad was removed by MJ.
And there's a catch down the leg side.
Yeah, well, he strangled, he kind of weirdly strangled Shazad Boldim around his legs. So it was 7 for 2 in like the first 3 overs of the test match.
Yeah.
And given that Australia had just beaten South Africa in their most recent series away from home, we're thinking, well, this could be uncompetitive the other way. Australia just won the Ashes 5-0. They've just beaten South Africa in South Africa. Maybe Pakistan are about to cop a rare shellacking in the desert, but little did we know how different the whole thing would play out. So the story shifted when Azhar Ali walked in with Yunus Khan initially, then Misbah al-Haq, and these partnerships form. The other threads of this day were that Steve O'Keefe was on test debut belatedly. We thought he'd play earlier than this, but he got his first opportunity to partner with Nathan Lyon, and his first wicket in test cricket, if you're wondering, was Asad Shafiq, who's a favourite of yours, Geoff, with his famous numbers. I say famous to you and you alone. What he's achieved at number 6.
Yes.
That's the weird category.
Second most prolific number 6. He's it was like 200 runs behind Steve Waugh, and they didn't let him get there. I think Stokes has passed them all now.
Yeah. And Sarfraz Khan, Ahmed even. Sarfraz Ahmed, not Sarfraz Khan. Sarfraz Ahmed, who made 100 as well on day 2, and they were really spanking.
And he was dancing. He was skipping down the pitch. It was Sarfraz's best innings. It was twinkling. It was real wicketkeeper stuff. Smith's 97 is in that game as well, isn't it?
No, that's the next week in Abu Dhabi. So we've got first week in Dubai where Australia have got to have a day in the dirt because it feels like they're going to have a long time in the dirt, but it ends up being cut short, all out for 454, and somehow Mitch Johnson returns the magnificent figures of 3 for 39 from 31 overs. The Aussies get their go. And Warner maintains the tempo of Sarfraz, remembering he's made a better than a run ball 100. It's an amazing 100, really. I wasn't there for this bit, showing how my life was moving. I was on the way to the airport, listening to White Line Wireless en route to a 40th birthday party, which I would return from the next morning and get back to commentate on day 4 of this Test match. I was darting back and forth quite a bit, but loving every minute of it. Hello to MJ if you're listening, the other MJ whose birthday it was in Brisbane 11 years ago nearly. Anyway, so Warner walks out a 128 runs down with Chris Rogers. He gets overwhelming majority of those runs, ends up getting 133 in a real hurry. Rogers down the other end, the ever reliable, gets 38 from 130, giving a sense of how they complemented each other so well. He gets that 100 in Dubai, and that was his third 100 in a row. So I think the plural hundreds reference is that in his most recent tests before this, he'd completed twin centuries in the Cape Town win, so this constituted 3 on the trot, thus plural hundreds for Warner. And he would go on to make 3 in a row again against New Zealand at the start of the 2015-16 series, a year on, where he went twin hundreds in Brisbane and a single 100 the next week at Perth when he got...
That's the double, the big one.
Yeah, 230 odd in a day.
He's 254 he ended up with, something like that.
Yeah, and I think almost all of them are on day 1 when he just absolutely monstered New Zealand. Where the innings turned for Australia, their first dig was when Radhat Ali, there's a name for you, the man who dropped Shane Watson in the World Cup quarterfinal a few months on from this. He ran Alex Doolan out. A bit of a what could have been there for Doolan, because this ends up being his final Test match. But to be run out definitely hurt where Australia were. Clark's then caught in the leg side trap. Zulfikar Barber, the 35-year-old left arm finger spinner, gets the Aussie captain on debut. Both Smith on 50 odd and Marsh are out to the spinners as well. Then Brad Haddin, and he must be into day 4 by this point, or maybe it's day 3, I'm confused, who knows, is bowled by Imran Khan, the other Imran Khan, the one that had the blonde tips in his hair all the time. I remember
Beach
commentating
Imran.
on this as well. Yeah.
It'd be like a Barbie or Ken range. You go, I've got backyard barbecue Imran Khan. I've got beach vacation Imran Khan. This was Malibu Imran Khan. This is imprisoned for spurious reasons Imran Khan. Here's the whole range. Oh, look, he's got a little jumpsuit and a little tin cup to rattle on the bars.
Is he out at the moment? I'm not sure if he's in or out.
I think he's still in.
Yeah, he might be in for a while, depending on how things play out within Pakistan. But yeah, that Imran bowled Brad Haddin with a beauty with the second new ball. I remember calling that moment and it being quite a big moment. And Australia go from 6 for 249 to 303 all out. Bit of resistance from Johnson down the list. And then Pakistan toyed with Australia in the second innings, classic third innings batting. They got 286 for 2 declared in 78 overs. Yunus Khan completes twin tons. Ahmed Shahzad got one as well. But let's just focus on twin hundreds for a moment. Mentioned Warner before about having gotten twin tons twice in relative quick succession. It was the only time that Yunus Khan did it in his career. I was wondering how often has it happened in Test history? Well, for men, it's 95 times. The most recent was Joe Root at Lord's last year against Sri Lanka, which I was there for. So it's about twice as often as a Test hat trick or a Test triple, which when you consider how infrequent they are, it's still pretty rare. Yeah. I don't know whether we give proper deference to twin hundreds in the way we speak of them. So Gavaskar, Ponting and Warner did it thrice.
3 times,
Then 11 players have done it twice. The most odd on that list, by the way, is Zimbabwe's Brendan Taylor, got twin hundreds on 2 occasions in Test cricket. That's when Yunus Khan did it the only time in his Test career. Of course, he got other milestones as well. Got more than 30 Test hundreds. He passed 10,000 runs when we were there, Geoff, in Sydney in 2017. So one of the modern Pakistani greats, a real mainstay.
100 in every country. Well, at the time, every Test playing country doesn't have one in Ireland or Afghanistan. But
I think he and Steve Waugh are the only 2 to do that when you pass a certain number of countries. So prolific career. Steve O'Keefe got the only 2 wickets of Pakistan's second innings, which is, I didn't realise that it's a bit of a scandal that he was dropped. I said in Abu Dhabi they brought in a seamer for O'Keefe and played like 5 all-rounders, 4 of whom got bowled spin, Smith, Clark, Maxwell, etc. But yeah, Socky got the only 2 wickets to fall here. Lyon wasn't overly penetrative, and I remember that because it's the first time I wrote an article about a guy I knew from before my time in journalism, and was quite critical of him. And I remember at the time that feeling like quite a burden writing a piece that was slanted negatively, and I'm like, oh shit, how's this going to go? Do I have the bottle for this? But it all worked out pretty well for Nathan Lyon, so I'm sure he didn't mind. For the sort of 150 people who probably read it on the ABC website, I'm sure it's all okay. But anyway, they set Australia 438 with that declaration in about 4 sessions. Rogers and Warner got off to a decent start, but a couple of wickets fell on 44. One of those was poor old Alex Doolan. So his last test innings, there's a run out in the first dig and his leg before wicket to Zulfikar's straight one, which was so good through the course of that series. Everyone was out to Zulfikar's straight one. Doolan's 4 test matches netted 191 runs at 24, but he was 11 away from 100 on debut, remember, back in that first test against South Africa when he was caught at short leg for 89. So
James Vince energy.
What could have been there? Had he reached 3 figures there, it could have been a different kind of journey, but not to be. Lovely bloke, though, Alex Doolan, and still gets around doing commentary and always enjoy when we see him around the traps. Smith got 55 batting at number 6, which would be his final series there, and Mitch Johnson got 61, and just for a moment it felt like he and Pete Siddle might be able to bat at the draw, but it was going to be a marathon effort across like 3 hours, and they ultimately were knocked over in the final session of the test match. Great timing from Pakistan to win by our number for Kennedy, 221 runs. Zulfikar 5, Yasir Shah 4, both on debut, names and a series that will always stand out. And of course, 4 years on from that to the week where Australia held on famously for a draw, thanks to Usman Khawaja and Tim Payne and Nathan Lyon and all the rest. And that proved to be another big moment 4 years on in our story, I guess, where we had the rights and so on. So, some final word history, some White Line Wireless history, and a series that does fade into the memory a little bit, probably deservedly so, but not quite so much for us, and clearly not for Kennedy either, who was there. 221 AUD to get us going today, Geoff.
Beautiful. I love it. My main memory of that is that last day. I think maybe it was 7 or 8 down at lunch, and Andy Lane and I had set up the broadcast, sent everyone home. We said, it's fine. We'll just call out the last little bit from here. And they ended up batting for the entire session and then a bit of the 5th session, which is absolutely ragged. That's by right. The end of that, having just the 2 of us. That was it. We're like, well, we've got to keep going, as it was Siddle, Johnson, and then Siddle blocking it out for a while.
Yeah, I think that Johnson's strike rate's quite good, which suggests that like the way he was trying to see it out was by still playing his shots. I actually don't remember this, but I'm sure it happened. I don't doubt.
I remember some of it. Theorist. I went into a trance basically by the end of it, because I was just I'd never, we didn't have that much practice calling, so doing 2 and a bit hours of it straight was taxing on mind and body. Right, I've got Jim Carnegie, who's sent through a pledge of $4.62. It's in the greenbacks. It's got a clue.
He's new. G'day, Jim. Great to have you. I wonder whether you're from Carnegie. If you are, that'd be quite the thing. It's a bloody niche one, Jim says. Like me, this guy is Victorian born, then moved to Tasmania, but I doubt he's living in North Carolina now. I was just talking to an American. I'll come back to this. Not a particularly outstanding record. The stat is his total first-class runs, but I'd love to hear about him, as he was nice to me when I met him as a kid. I just met a guy who was guesting on our commentary panel. He's a Twitter fella called Crick American Fan or some such, and he's from North Carolina. And he's I don't know how old Nate is, but I would guess like our age. And it's his first time he's left America. And on the second day of that journey, he's come to the Oval to watch, and he's ended up on commentary because he's got a bit of a social media presence, and he works on the emerging cricket podcast with Tim Cutler and co. So Cutler and co. There you go. For Australia, Melbourne. Never thought of that before. But yeah, so g'day to Nate if you're listening. He says he's a final word person as well. Geoff, you can tell us the story of 462 for Jim, who's with us new as a patron.
I can, and thank you, Jim, for this, because I didn't know anything about Mark Ridgway, and I feel better for knowing about Mark Ridgway. I particularly enjoyed this one. So Mark Ridgway was nice to our pledger, Jim Carnegie, when Jim was a kid, but Mark Ridgway was also known as a wild type when he was a player. So he bowled for Tassie between 93-4 and 2000. He's very late coming to first-class cricket. There are a couple of things in here that you are going to be right up your street, Adam. So he comes from Warrigal, where my grandparents are from. He played bush cricket. He didn't have any particular thoughts about going higher than that. He just ran in and opened the bowling out in the bush. And then he gets an offer to play first grade with Collingwood in 1985. He does that for a year, driving from Warragul to the city and back. The Monash is nowhere near what it is now, and so the trip takes hours longer than it does now. It's about 100 kilometres from Warragul to the city, so it's a fair old drive even these days. So he does that for a year, gets sick of it, goes back to the bush for a few seasons. He's a big, burly sort of bowler. He's one of those guys with the big shaved bald head and the big 90s goatee, the kind of Homer Simpson circular style goatee. And he's an outswing bowler. He's got decent pace, but he can move the ball laterally. And according to him, he's not even that into cricket. He likes footy more. He loves playing bush football. He's in the forward line. He's a bit of a troublemaker. He likes a scrap. And he gets invited to train with Hawthorn at one stage, your club.
That's the one thing I knew about him. I knew that he had some connection to like training at Hawthorn or something.
He basically said he couldn't hack the pace. They did some runs. He blew up on the long runs. He couldn't keep up. And he's like, I'm not fit enough for this bullshit. I just want to go and play footy in the bush. But he loves to tell a story about how he played for Druin under 16s. And he's like, the forward line is forward pocket, left forward pocket, Ridgway, full forward, Gary Ayres, right forward pocket, Gary Ablett. Yeah, handy. So it's that part of the world. It's football country. But he carries on his Warragul cricket seasons. In 1989, he gets approached by John Scholes, who's coaching at Fitzroy Doncaster, which will later be Glenn Maxwell's club. And John Scholes asks him to come back to the city and bowl. So he agrees to do it. He's working in Traralgon for a trucking company. So that's 160 Ks from Doncaster. Warragul's 100 Ks. So he's just driving all over the state for a few years, but he's taking wickets. He's flirting with the possibility of higher honours. He eventually makes it into the state squad for a bit. He's on the fringes of the Vic squad, but he's in the squad and he thinks he's going okay. And in 1992, he wins the Ryder Medal, the Jack Ryder Medal for the best in the comp in Victorian Premier cricket. So, top of the top if you're not playing state cricket. He takes 44 wickets that year. And as a celebration, as a congratulations, just after winning the Ryder Medal, he gets sacked from the Victorian squad. The coach is a fellow called Les Stillman, who says, you're too old, you've had your time, you're not going to make it. So he's 32 years old at this point, Mark. He's been around for a while. He's soon to turn 33.
Les Stillman, who one day I will record a podcast, or I'll make a documentary, or I'll write an article about the great Darren Berry, Peter Roach palaver of when Berry was dropped for a teenage Peter Roach when Les Stillman was the coach, and it was like legit front page news for like a week.
Oh, we got so much correspondence. You mentioned this a few weeks ago, and so many people wrote in saying, "I remember that." Shield News still. Well, Darren Berry will come up in a minute. So he goes, fuck this, I'm moving back to the bush. And then his work offers him a job in Tasmania as the state manager. They're a transport, trucking, warehousing sort of company. And I'm not 100% clear on whether they offer him the job before Greg Shippard gets in touch or if it's the other way around. But either way, he gets offered a paid job in Tasmania, and then Greg Shippard is the Tassie coach and says, why don't you come down and trial for us? We could use a swing bowler. So they ask for the information that they need. You've got to send off the personal info about yourself. And Mark Ridgway goes, I don't reckon they're going to pick up a 33-year-old. So he just lies about his age. He just takes 6 years off. He goes, I'm 27. and everyone believes him. No one questions it. It's like plausible because it would have meant his first grade debut, he would have been 19, so that could happen. But you live in an era where you can't just hop on the internet and look up a date of birth, and everyone's like, yeah, 27 looks good to me.
Well, this is it, isn't it? We often joke about Shahid Afridi. Well, they're of the same era broadly, same era. Who's to know how many Australians did a similar thing, or how many players who weren't Pakistani realised that it was advantageous to lie about their ages as well. That thing about always being 39 for news readers and so on. Well, Mark Ridgway was always 27.
He was always 27. Jim Morrison, it was Kurt Cobain, it was Janis Joplin, it was Mark Ridgway, forever 27. So not to be unflattering, but he probably looked like an older guy. The pictures of him playing, he doesn't look 27. He looks like he's Zulfikar Baba kind of style. He's seen some outdoor weather, has Mark Ridgway at this point in his life. But he plays the trials. He gets on the preseason tour. He does well enough, and they pick him. They pick him 3 times in his first season. He plays 3 pretty middling Shield games, and then his next season he has 3 decent games. He takes 6 for 79 against South Australia, And then his 6th game is against Victoria. Finally, the grudge match, he gets to have a go back at the Vicks, and he laps it up. They bat first. He makes 70 with the bat down the order, his highest first-class score. And then he follows up with 6 for with the ball, 6 for 29, I think it is. He routs Victoria first time around. Tassie don't win a lot in these days, so they go on to win this one. He takes a couple more wickets in Victoria's second innings, so 8 for the match. And he says that every wicket that he takes, he gives the finger to Les Stillman, who's in the stands, saying, "Oh, drop me from the Victorian squad, did you?" Eventually, he gets caught about the age thing because Michael Divenuto steals his driver's license because he's like, you do not look as young as you say you are, and goes through his wallet and pinches his license. But by that stage, he's taking wickets, he's bowling well, and Tassie are like, okay, doesn't matter, we'll just let it slide. So gives it his all for 6 seasons, plays some mercantile mutual cricket as well. Apparently an absolute mad dog on the field, like by his own admission. He says he got done a bunch of times for fines and points and suspensions and all for getting stuck into everybody. But he was also known for entertaining the opposition, particularly while he was batting, because they would sledge him and then he would give it back in ways that people found entertaining. So his specialty was making the slips cord and crack up laughing while he was out there with the bat. And he could bat a bit. He wasn't the best going around, but he was okay. So he's almost 40 when he finishes up. His body's shot. He just can't stand the rigours anymore and pulls the pin. But Darren Berry was the keeper at Fitzroy Doncaster, as well as playing against him for Victoria. He said, by his assessment in that era, as far as swing bowlers in Australia went, he said it was Fleming, Saker, Ridgway. He was clearly the next best after those two who were so well respected. There's a quote from Darren Berry in an article that says, "Behind the shenanigans and all the bullshit, he was a fantastic bowler. He made the ball talk." And they got in touch with Greg Shippard and asked about the fake age thing. And Shippard said he didn't care too much about how old he was. The quote is, "I take them as I see them. I saw someone who could swing the ball. He had a beautiful outswinger and he surprised a lot of people because he just ambled in, and with next to no run-up, he could bowl much faster than you ever thought. Powerful action and a strong body, and he was aggressive, never took a backward step. He used to get good players out. He was a terrific warrior for Tassie, a revelation for us." So they make a Shield final in March 98, part of that sequence where Tom Moody captains a bunch of wins for WA. So they lose the final, but even making it is very significant for Tassie at that point. Ridgway gets out. Damien Martin, Justin Langer, Ryan Campbell, Joe Angel, all people who've had some final word time in one way or another. And he said, after he retired, he just couldn't believe his luck, basically. He loved that he got the opportunity to do this. His state captain was David Boone. He was playing with young Ricky Ponting. He's playing with Sean Young, umpire Rod Tucker, with Colin Miller, with Jamie Cox. And he couldn't believe he was getting paid to play, just years of bush cricket. And suddenly he was like, this is unbelievable. I'm bowling to these players. I'm playing with all of these. So he ends up with 46 first-class matches, 161 wickets, 462 runs, which is the Nerd Pledge number. Struggles for a while after he quits. He gets a Tasmania tattoo. He misses the game a lot. He has some mental health demons. So he's got like the state crest, the team crest tattooed on him, not the map of. He gets help. He comes through it. He eventually ends up as a Victorian state selector for a time. So bowling style, short run up, pace, swings it. He's like the younger, angrier Alec Bedser, who might come up later in the show.
Brilliant, Geoff. Jim Carnegie, thanks for joining us on the program. 462 new pledger. You can do it too. Patreon.com/thefinalword. We'll take a break. Back with a moment with my next answer. It's the Final Word Story Time 223 with me and him. We're here thanks to Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, who are Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm. Geoff, I met with them yesterday. We have got so many stories to tell. Not just on this show, being a history program, but stories to tell about Maurice Blackburn through the course of 2025, this season and next. Not just about super insurance either. They are very good at what they do, Maurice Blackburn, their campaigns team. So more coming from them soon, but just wanted to flag that in addition to telling you about their magnificent lawyers, some of the best in the country, the work they actually do is what I'm keen to kind of sharpen up on and tell people what they do with those brilliant lawyers they have at their disposal. And also, Geoff, we're in partnership at the moment with Odin Mortgages and Tax, or Odin Mortgage and Tax to be precise. I don't know why I pluralised it. They are an organisation that are very helpful for people like you and me, people who don't live in Australia, but
Mm-hmm.
whisper it, Australian.
Mm-hmm.
And
It
this
happens.
isn't like a
There
this
are
isn't a
there
club.
are more than just the two of us. You know, I've
And
met a
this,
few of them. I've never been to a country that I haven't met Australians in. I'm pretty sure.
Indeed, and this isn't like a Clive James thing where, when you've got two countries, you've got no countries thing. I get that, and I understand that, when you are away from home, you can feel a bit distant from Australia, and you can feel a bit distant. You get accused by people in England of being too Australian,
Mm-hmm.
and people in Australia of being too
Mm-hmm.
English. But
Mm-hmm.
you do need to keep a foot in both camps. You need to be sensible about your financial arrangements, and this is exactly what Odin do, and they've done it for over 2,000 clients now in 40 countries. I've read heaps about them now. They basically make sure that all of your financial arrangements around your mortgages or prospective mortgages and your tax are in tippity top shape when you're living over here. The tax bit's often very complicated with multiple tax returns across different countries. And if you don't have your finger on the pulse, and it's bloody hard, it's not just a time zone thing. It's just like trying to have your ducks in a row when you've got a foot in both camps can often be extremely challenging. So their $300 consultation is money extremely well spent. I'll be doing it myself because I need to make sure that I don't, fall foul of the ATO or of HMRC or anyone else in between for that matter. So that's all in the show notes. Go to our splash page and learn more about Odin, because as soon as they came on to my radar, I'm like, they are an organisation we should be working with, because they're just like you and me. They're people who live not in Australia anymore, but they might one day. You might one day, I might one day. I don't really know. Who knows what the future holds? And when you do move back, you want to make sure you've had your shit together when you've been away. That's the sell. Do it. Go there. Lots of people who listen to our show are in that boat.
I agree. It's in the notes. You'll find it. Now, number. It's for you. It's Paddy Considine, who's almost Constantine, it's Keanu Reeves. Yeah, must be. The Devil. Pretty corny. Didn't really work out, that particular film, I'm going to say. $4.53 for Paddy. That's the number. It's in Australian dollars. Paddy's a new pledger. Welcome aboard as well. Part of the influx that we had in January and February. So we're having a lot of new numbers on the show the last few weeks, and will do for the next few weeks. Paddy says this number is related to a test player who in their last innings smashed a brilliant century. If you get it within the click of a finger, feel free to have a free hit. Did ya?
Kind of, yeah. It relates to the ground I'm looking at in front of me here, and it also relates in many respects to two people I'm working with today, which is quite a nice thing. So we're going to the summer of 2018 for this one, where we were last week when interviewing Keaton Jennings, actually, where India's quicks had really found what they're after. Like Indian teams had travelled to England and Australia and other SENA countries, and never really penetrated. It was often their short suit, but in 2018, I remember interviewing Harsha here, and he just couldn't believe it. He's like, he couldn't fathom that we were talking about just how powerful and dynamic India's quicks were, because he's lived through and worked through an era when that wasn't the case, certainly away from home. So this was that summer. Ishant Sharma at his best, Mohammad Shami coming into his own, and a brand new Jasprit Bumrah. That's the context. And Bhuvaneshwar Kumar playing his role at different points as well. Really weird series, which we've talked of before, where England won 4-1. There's a world where England lose that 4-1, but I guess they won the important moments. And it was a series, I'm providing context here, it was a series where early runs were a nightmare to get. Both teams' openers were nowhere throughout the course of the series. This is the famous batch of Dukes balls. The 2018 Dukes that Broad and Anderson loved so much, they requested that they keep a batch back for the 2019 Ashes. They're like, these are so good for us. We want these Dukes again, and thus the conspiracy theory, which I've advanced many, many, many times, that there was still a 2018 Dukes in the box of balls when they made that change in 2023. I digress. I'm on my way to talking about Alistair Cook. Final innings here, 2018. Just an aside, by the way, I love on his Crick Info profile, Cook played for just 6 teams: England 19s, England Lions, MCC, Essex, Bedfordshire. Done. That's your lot. No highfalutin franchise names for Cookie.
No Kulna Warriors, no Jamaica Talawars.
No. And look, he did captain the England T20 side at one point, but still, there's a wider point here about the era that he came through in. Now, I would have sworn that Cook was a total mess in this series, and I guess in some ways he was, depending on how you interpret the job of an opener. But the truth is, in context, the balls and the performances of the other 3 openers in the series, He's going at about the average. I mean,
Mm.
through the 5 test matches, he misses out at Birmingham, gets 21 at Lords, gets 29 and 17 at Nottingham, gets 17 and 12 at Southampton. But I think what happened here, this is my theory anyway, the series happened so quickly. We spoke about 5 test matches in 6.5 weeks in 2023 and feeling like it had happened too quickly to take it all in by the time we arrived at the Oval. It was 5 days shorter in 2018. This was over in 6 weeks. It was rapid fire, which meant that from a narrative perspective or a news perspective, stories that got a bit of momentum just took over. And one was, will Cook retire? And having missed out at Southampton, that's precisely what he did. He rocked up at the Oval on the next day and he pulled the pin. That was it. Consecutive test matches, Southampton at the Oval, done. And at the time, as someone working on this series, it felt right. Like it felt like he was actually done. It felt like this was the right time for him to pull the pin. I would have said as much. I'm sure there's articles I wrote at the time saying, well played Alistair Cook for pulling the rein at the right time. In hindsight, he might have actually gone too early. His returns for Essex in the following 4 first-class seasons suggest that he hadn't lost it. I reckon it's more a case that we got carried away collectively, one freakish series with a freakish batch of balls where no one could get a run early on against the Seamers, and he identified that as him reaching the end when maybe he wasn't quite at the end. Anyway.
Yeah, but he played so much. Like it's the
Yeah.
England exhaustion index where,
Yeah.
like the fact that he's like that 100th test he plays at Perth when they get annihilated. He's so young, in the same way as Joe Root was so young when he played his 100th test. And you go, well, how is it possible that a 100 test player is usually someone limping towards the very end of their career, and why is that one Muppet made of leather sort of, they've been out in the sun too long, they're cured, they're baked, they're cracked, they're ancient. And he wasn't, because he was playing 20 test matches a year, not to mention the white ball stuff that he did play for quite a long time.
Yeah.
So I can understand just being burned out, starting young.
It's one of those things where all these things are true at the same time. 161 famously consecutive test matches where he didn't miss one. Captain, as you say, white ball commitments. Like, it was a lot. But like the one test match of the summer where they played on a flatty here at the Oval, it was a very different story. So day one, I remember like the Oval does pomp really well. Out the front of the beds to stand, Geoff, you've seen it many times yourself. Guards of honour, down those stairs. You get a really good look at players at the Oval when they come down from the dressing room. So you get a really good look at them, probably looking at the moment, it's probably 25 stairs. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like other grounds where you emerge from a tunnel. Here, you are of the people, with the people when you enter. And that's, I think, part of this. And he walks out and has that guard of honour. There's beautiful pictures of him entering for the first time on morning one. And it does feel a bit destined, like he's flying for the first 40 odd runs from memory. He chops on for 71 and there's that sadness outside the ground. I was in the outside press box and be like, oh, we missed the chance to see something special. Started with 100, could have ended with 100, and we all kind of moved on from it. You know what I mean? Like the test match, the probability of England batting well and Cook getting a chance to make a second innings 100 isn't that high. The story moved on. They get 332. India do pretty well in response in tough conditions. They get 292. Super consistent bowling effort from England. I remember that day. But only 40 runs in it. So England do have the chance to bat properly a second time. And Cook by stumps on day 3 is 42 at the close. 114 for 2 is the score. He's got Joe Root for company after they lost 2 quick wickets. Quite important those two build on the 4th day. The man he gave the captaincy to. Now, overnight, of course, I'm obsessed with all the numbers. I always am. And I'd harassed Andrew Sampson, who's also here today, about what Cook would need to do the next day to finish with a test batting average of 45. Owing to that slide I referred to before, his average had dropped below. It was 44.8 or something. I'm like, oh, that's not right. You know, he deserves to have an average that's 45. Doesn't mean an awful lot, but to me, it felt, given his career, it would have been an appropriate, landing point, 45 point something. And Samo told me that provided he got to 50, so 50 and out would mean an average of 45.00. And I'm like, you beauty. So when he celebrated his 50 with a clip off his pads, predictably, I celebrated in the press box. I'm like, you beauty, that's the 45 clear. And people probably thought, what the fuck's he on about? But anyway, that was achieved nice and early in the day. And it's like me high-fiving Samo kind of energy. And as everybody knows, I'm sure listening to this pod from here, it hardly ended at that point. He turned the clock back. it was a really important innings. Root arrives at 62 for 2, and they take it to 321 for 3, a massive partnership. Root gets a century as well. But before that, back to Daniel, I spoke to him just before he went on comms. Cook was on about 88, I reckon. It was mid to high 80s. And I said, you're going to get the 100, mate. You're going to get the Cook 100 on farewell, And a 20-minute stint on TMS, as we know. And Cook just dried up a bit for a few overs. And it's getting towards the end of Daniel's 20 minutes. Then Cook plays an unbelievable straight drive to move from 91 to 95. I remember it like it was yesterday. And he gets to 96, and I reckon it's Norcross's last over on air, as in like 3 balls later. It's a few more words from Ebony Rainford Brent, and next will be, I think it was Agnew. Jonathan Agnew will be next on. Mm-hmm. But no, it was meant to be for Norkie. On 96, next over, Jadeja bowls to Cook. He back cuts to deep backward point. The easiest single you'll ever see. Out from the Archbishop Tennyson School, jogs, Jaspit Boomerang, collects the ball, and for reasons best known by the great man, hurls the ball at the non-striker stumps. There's a mistake backing up. Cook brings up his century with a 5, 4 overthrows. He's 33rd and last. An identical image to his first 100 in Nagpur, which I was able to get the picture of and compare like to like from 2005 at Nagpur. Same celebration when he ran through in 2018 at the Oval some 13 years later. And Daniel, not only did he get the commentary pitch perfect, he immediately, and this is where prep's important, and I don't want to bang on about this too much, but there's something to be said for commentators who do the work because they are rewarded for it. And knowing every last detail, Daniel was immediately able to reference when Cook got 100 at the Oval thanks to overthrows back in 2010, when his test spot was in jeopardy before that 10-11 series. He got 100 in exactly the same way at exactly the same ground, and Daniel was able to reference it in that crucial moment on commentary, which was the colour that brought the whole thing to life when he was sitting there with Ebony doing his thing. So I was very proud of Daniel in that moment, always am, but it featured in our Calling the Shots documentary as well. So I might drop in that ball here.
Well, Cook try and get him in singles. Jadeja is into him now. And he cuts at this. He's going to get one of those singles as it goes to backward point. He moves to 97. The crowd applauding. Oh, there's overthrows. Oh, my word, that's going to run away to the boundary. It is. Cook's done it. He's reached his 100 in his final test match. What an astounding achievement for England's leading run scorer of all time. He takes his helmet off. The crowd go berserk. What a way to get to it. He got to 100 at the Oval like that years ago against Pakistan. He's done it again now in his last match. He's embraced warmly by Joe Root. What a magnificent moment. And the crowd just giving waves and waves of applause. Everyone on their feet.
So Cook ends up dismissed for 147. England tee off to get to 423 for 8. They leave themselves about 4 sessions to win the test match for about 5 minutes at tee. 464 on day 5 looked gettable because Rishabh Pant was teeing off with KL Rahul.
That's right.
But then there was another beautiful twist where Jimmy Anderson comes back, gets the final wicket of the test match. They bowl out India for 345 to win by 118. And in doing so, Anderson goes past Glenn McGrath for test wickets. He and Cook walk off the Oval arm in arm in his best mate's final test match, a moving moment. So when Cook's been asked about his retirement in more recent years, he goes, yeah, maybe I could have gone on, but look at what I got. Jimmy and I walking off together, him with the McGrath thing, him, in his case, walking off the previous day with an extraordinary 100 and an ovation around the Oval. I've never heard anything quite like it. When Cook reached 3 figures, that's the loudest I've heard the Oval, and the most sustained applause as well. It was the cover of the Wisden Cricketer's Almanac the following year, he and Anderson together. Bit of a fairy tale. And of course, as it relates to the number off the very top here, his batting average, Paddy Constantine, was 45.3, thus 453. So he passed that number in his final test innings.
Beauty. And I'm sure there were reports at the time saying Cook is retired and perhaps that's Anderson's last hurrah as well. And who would have known that he'd still be playing 6 years later and probably could have been playing 7 years later.
I think didn't he say that he considered it? I think he said he considered it. I think at the time he said something like he did a tail enders ep. They were in the pub like the next day. I think he said something like, yeah, like we kind of talked about it and thought, oh, maybe. Speaking of Jim, by the way, he's been knighted today in Rishi Sunak's farewell. Knighted with like some of the worst, most reprehensible people you'll ever see listed ever. I don't know whether Jimmy wants to keep that company, but that might be a conversation for our weekly show next week. Geoff, one more number. I hate to put a cap on this, but you might want to hammer through this because I've got to get back to commentary. Andy Newton is our pledger. 818 is the pledge. He's brand new as well. Andy, thank you for being there. Such a generous amount of money. As we always say, we could not make the show without people like you who stump up and back us in. There's no clue, which means, Geoff, you've got a free hit.
I do, but I'm confident of the answer because I had a little word to Andy and said, am I on the right track? And he said, you're on the right track. And I'm glad it's a Surrey answer because yours was a Surrey answer, an oval answer, relevant to where you are. We've spoken about Alec Bedser on the show a number of times. We talked a couple of months ago about brothers bowling and how many wickets they could take together. Eric and Alec took 15 wickets together on 3 different occasions in first-class cricket. They never took 18, which is the number we were looking for. That ended up being some brothers in the USA back in the 1880s. There we go. Go back a few weeks if you want to find that episode. So in some ways, this should be a Daniel Norcross episode because he loves making gags about the Bedser twins and wearing the same clothes and living in the same house. In some ways, it should be a Bharat episode because he likes to sing the calypso. Alec Bedser, who taught you to bowl Australia, which he just sings ad nauseum. Like when I've roomed with him on tours, I just have it going around in my head. Isha, his wife, knows, like it's like Pavlovian reaction. He sings the first half and she sings the second half of the line. She doesn't know who Alec Bedser is, but she knows how the line goes.
I think I told you before as well, in addition to that, Daniel's got an encyclopedic memory of both Bedser twins Cricinfo numbers, as in he knows all of them off heart.
Sure.
And when you put one too many glasses of wine into him and away you go. So that might be some fun to be had with him on a future story.
Yeah, well, in some ways, it would have been good to do this on a Norcross show, but it's good to have it on a show when you're sitting at the Oval where
looking at the stand.
He played for 21 years, something like that. So you can't talk about Alex Bedser without Eric Bedser. They're twins, obviously born on the same day. Alec plays 485 first-class matches, Eric 457. They both play for Surrey. They debut in the same match in 1939. Alec plays until 1960, Eric until 1962. They serve together during the war. They refuse promotion so they can stay together in the same unit. They're in the RAF, the police, whatever the coppers who keep the pilots in line when they're on the ground, I guess. And they live in the same house after cricket. They go into business together. They're inseparable.
Didn't they share a room?
You've told me that.
I'm pretty sure they Burton
and Ernie. Yeah,
I think they Burton and Ernie. This might be Norcross as well. Who's to know which bits are like actually happened versus Daniel and his third bottle of Pinot Grigio. Sure. I mean, either way.
It's a time when you didn't get paid a lot to play cricket. So making economies, having a one-room cottage, that might have been what they did in their 2 little single beds and their matching pajamas. It's an interesting relationship because the big difference is that Alec plays a bunch of Test cricket and Eric doesn't play any, which must have been difficult in some ways. Surely Eric would have wanted it, but he would have been happy for his brother, and there might have been resentment. I don't know. It didn't ruin their relationship. That's all. He didn't just play Test, Alec. He's regarded as an England great of the 20th century. Bradman had him in his best 11 that he made that was probably on some commemorative tea towels or something. The main difference is that they both start as quick bowlers and then they decide if they're going to both try to play for Surrey, they need to do different things. So Alec keeps bowling fast. Eric starts bowling spin. He's a better bat, so he tends to be higher in the order. And they're big dudes. There's this quote from Mike Selvey from an obituary. He says, at midday on the button, at any test of the past few decades at Lord's or the Oval, a pair of identical giants would appear at the back of the press box or the pavilion bar and summon an esteemed colleague for a pint, which is a lovely image, just thundering in there. And Selvey gives an interesting angle on that brotherly relationship because there are jokes and there's a lot of parody about it. So Eric dies 4 years earlier than Alec. And Selvey says, when Eric died a few years ago, everyone expected Alec to follow suit and fade away with the emptiness of the loss of his inseparable twin, but he seemed to flourish instead until ill health made an impact. Perhaps he sought the company of cricketers and cricket people even more. So they weren't just about hanging out with each other, I suppose. They're guys of strong opinions. They're not little insipid dudes sitting in their matching pajamas. They like to get into it. They like to argue about the problems of the game. They like to take it on. They're competitors, and that's why they play for so long. So start out before the war, only 2 first-class matches in 1939 against the universities. Alec doesn't take any wickets, doesn't make any runs. They do their war service. He plays in a bunch of RAF games during the war for RAF teams, takes a hat-trick against a touring West Indies side, takes a hat-trick against the Coppers, the Met Police team. ACAB.
I'm trying to play it against them this year, actually. I've put my hat in the ring to play an MCC game against the Met Police this year. I don't know whether I'll be selected or not, but that'd be a nice. I didn't realise they that they were as I just kind of thought they were like a local cricket club. Maybe they're more than that if they were playing these types of fixtures.
Yeah, well, they were playing those fundraising fixtures during the war, and those keep everybody cheerful. You'd have the Navy teams and the Army teams and the RAF teams and so on. But yeah, 3 against the Coppers, so I'm assuming ACAB is all cops. Get out to Alec Bedser. That's the way that we can interpret that. Gets going in 1946 properly, takes 100 wickets in the season. That's his first proper season. And then he does that for 10 seasons in a row, does it in his 12th season. And in the 11th season in between, he takes 96 wickets. So he almost does 12 in a row. Plays through that period of Surrey dominance that you know a lot about, however many titles they won in the 50s. What was it? 5?
They won every year from 52 to 58. We've been talking about it a bit here of late because throughout the trot. So, you know, the last time a county won 4 or more was in that Stuart Surridge streak here in the 50s.
So bursts onto the scene, 46, gets into the test team on the basis of the early season, 7 for 49 on debut, which is a square root innings. We love that. 7 times 7 is 49. At the time, it's the best first innings of a career. That's been passed since, but it was then. So takes 7 and 4 in his first test, takes 4 and 7 in his second test, so 11 wickets in his first 2 test matches. Wisden Cricketer of the Year the following year, and the report from 1947, which is gloriously anachronistic, says, for a pace bowler, he takes a comparatively short run of 8 paces and imparts all his energy at the moment of delivery. Immensely strong, he can keep bowling for long spells, and when at the top of his form, he rarely sends down a loose ball. He uses the swerve very little, but turns the ball either way off the ground. A dependable fielder close to the wicket, his large hands usually grab anything within reasonable reach. While bowling is his first consideration, he's a useful batsman late in the order and not without style. So they're saying he's not a swing bowler, although everybody else always talks about him as a swing bowler. Selvey says he swung the ball sharply into the right-hander as his default delivery, and then for good measure developed the most devastating, wicked leg cutter the game has seen as an alternative. So apparently this is an accident. He figures this out in Australia, bowling on a flat one, that he can run his fingers down the ball and get it to grip. I'm guessing it's not 1946 when he's on his first trip to Australia, but maybe his second trip, because his first trip he gets whacked around a fair bit the first time he's been away from his twin as well. So the India series when he starts, 24 wickets at 12, and then the Australia series across 5 test matches takes 16 wickets at 54. So it's tough going, does a lot of the drudge work, carries on his shoulders a lot of the work that needs to be done in a weak post-war bowling attack. And it's interesting looking through his career because there are a bunch of series where he has pretty ordinary figures, where he's averaging above 30 at least, sometimes above 40 or 50 when South Africa visit in 1947, when Australia visit in 48, when England go to South Africa at the end of that year, and when West Indies visit in 1950 and win. He's averaging above 30 in all of those, and then figures out how to make it work when Australia next visit. Australia win heavily 4-1, but he takes 30 wickets at 16 on that losing side. And that's when he's in Australia, and I'm guessing that's when he figures out the cutter because he's got some other option to use. Dominates the next couple of summers against South Africa and India, 50 wickets in 9 test matches across those 2 summers, and then unleashes against Australia, 1953. He takes 39 wickets at 17 in the series. England win the 5th test to win the series 1-0. But he's a big player from the first test at Trent Bridge. He takes 7 in each innings, which we've talked about on the show before. He gets Lindsay Hassett out, who's the Australian captain in both innings, and it's the cutter. He uses that leg cutter. The quote is, the delivery which baffled Hassett in that Nottingham test was talked about in its day with the same reverence as Shane Warne's ball of the century. So that's when the Calypso gets written, the Calypso singer called Lord Kitchener, not to be confused with Lord Kitchener, who's a Trini guy who moves from Trinidad. I think he comes on the original Windrush ship. But he's certainly in that influx of migrants after World War II and settles in England and writes this song about Alec Bedser. And why not? Well, let's drop a bit of it in now.
This 1953 has made cricket history. Australia was leading while England was struggling. Then came a sudden disaster by our medium-pace bowler, Alec Bedser, who taught you to bowl Australia.
So that's what Barrett sings walking around the house or when he's on tour. And Alec Bedser doesn't play much after that 53 series. He plays 2 tests against Pakistan, their first tour to England, and then he plays 1 in Australia at the end of 1954 and 1 against South Africa in England in 55. He's left out after they get smashed in Brisbane in the first test of the series, and the reports at the time say it's controversial, but it also says that he was suffering from shingles and that hampered him in the Brisbane test.
Also might have been hampered that Hutton bowled first on a flatty.
Yeah, and they conceded 600.
600 plus, yeah, not helped by a skipper, fuck.
No, well, exactly. So there's reporting that he was not fit, but then reporting that it was very controversial that he was left out. But he's left out for Bob Appleyard, who Norcross likes to compare your late career bowling renaissance to turning to sort of medium pace spin, and Appleyard does okay. And then, they bring him in halfway through this South Africa series the following season, and he just plays the once in a low scoring chase where South Africa just get there. They got 3 wickets in hand when they managed to win that game. So it's something of an ignominious end, although he goes on to play for Surrey for several more years. The $8.18 is 8 for 18, which is his best first-class figures, not test figures, which he took for Surrey remarkably twice. 8 for 18 on 2 different occasions. So against Notts in 1952, bowls him out for 51. And then the next year against Warwickshire, bowls him out for 45 and takes 8 for 18 on both occasions. And the detail that I liked more than anything is both times wheeling away with his left-arm chuckers at the other end is Tony Locke, the guy who took the 1 wicket when Laker took 19, who took none for and 2 for when Bedser was taking 8 at the other end. So living up to his experience of I'm just watching. Alec Bedser, he takes 8 wickets. I'm just watching.
For the real diehards who saw on social media that I posted an interview I did yesterday is with someone who's got a lot of letters after their name. Well, this person in question watched Laker and Locke bowl together as a young lad. So there won't be many people left that have watched Laker and Locke bowl. But I'm not sure when that ep will drop. Quite possibly after this one, pending what goes on. But anyway, that is that. Hey, Geoff, I'm going to have to call time on Storytime 223, for I've got another place to be, 2 commentary boxes over. Most enjoyable episode of Storytime as ever. Patreon.com/The Final Word to be part of our crew. Thank you to everybody who is. We've got so much more coming up in the feed. Some brilliant interviews that'll drop in the next week or two. Quite a big announcement as well in Final Word land, which should land at some point in the middle of next week. Please do join us on Patreon to make all of this possible. Thanks to Maurice Blackburn. Thanks to Odin Mortgage and Tax. Thank you to everyone for listening, and have lovely weekends. Bye for now.
See you later.